This story was sent to me by Sarah Martinez via email, and honestly, it still gives me chills every time I think about it. I was working the night shift at a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town when I noticed him watching me through the window. But let me back up and tell you how this all started. I had just started this job about 3 weeks earlier. It was my first time working nights, and the pay was decent enough to help me get through college. The station was located on a lonely stretch of highway, about 15 minutes from the nearest residential area. During the day, it was busy with truckers and commuters, but after midnight, things got really quiet. Sometimes hours would pass without a single customer. The shift started like any other. I clocked in at 11 p.m., restocked the coolers, cleaned the coffee machines, and settled in behind the counter with my textbooks. Around 1 in the morning, I noticed a dark sedan pull into the parking lot. It didn't come to the pumps, though. Instead, it parked at the far edge of the lot, just outside the reach of our security lights. At first, I thought maybe someone was having car trouble or taking a rest. But after about 20 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. The car was still there, and I could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. Every time I looked up from my book, I could swear they were looking directly at the store window. Around 2 a.m., a truck driver came in for coffee and snacks. While I was ringing him up, he glanced toward the window and asked, "That guy in the sedan been sitting there long?" I told him about an hour, and the trucker shook his head. "That ain't normal, kid. You might want to call someone." After the trucker left, I tried to focus on studying, but I kept feeling watched. Every time I looked up, that car was still there. The person inside seemed to be studying the store, learning my routine. I started to notice they would lean forward whenever I moved around, tracking my movements. By 3 a.m., my nerves were shot. I called my manager, but it went straight to voicemail. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone sitting in a parked car? That wasn't illegal. But something in my gut was screaming that this wasn't right. Then things got worse. Around 3:30, the car door opened and a man got out. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and he started walking slowly around the perimeter of the parking lot, not toward the store, just circling the property like he was surveying it. He stayed in the shadows, but I could see him clearly enough to know he was watching me the entire time. My hands were shaking as I pretended to organize the cigarette display behind the counter. I kept my phone ready to call 911, but the man never actually approached the building. He just kept walking around the lot, occasionally stopping to look directly at me. The worst part was when he disappeared from view for about 10 minutes. I couldn't see him anywhere, and the car was still there with the door open. I started imagining him trying to find a way into the store, maybe checking the back entrance or looking for security cameras. Every little sound made me jump. When he reappeared, he was closer to the building, standing just outside the automatic doors. The motion sensors kept triggering, making the doors slide open and closed, but he never stepped inside. He just stood there, staring at me with this blank expression. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, I whispered that there was someone acting suspiciously around the store, and I felt unsafe. She said they'd send a patrol car to check it out. The moment I hung up, the man seemed to sense something had changed. He walked back to his car quickly, but didn't drive away immediately. Instead, he sat there for another few minutes, like he was deciding what to do next. About 15 minutes later, I saw police headlights approaching. The sedan immediately started up and drove off in the opposite direction, no headlights, disappearing into the darkness before the patrol car even reached the lot. The officer took my statement and said they'd increase patrols in the area, but they never caught the guy. The really unsettling part came the next day when I was talking to my coworker who worked the day shift. She mentioned that a customer had been asking weird questions about the night shift schedule, wanting to know if it was always the same person working alone. I quit that job the following week. Something about that night felt like more than just random creepy behavior. It felt like I had been specifically targeted, studied, like someone was planning something terrible. I still drive past that gas station sometimes, and I always check the parking lot, half expecting to see that dark sedan waiting in the shadows again. I found this on a Reddit thread by user Moving Day Nightmare, and it perfectly captures why you should trust your instincts about people. I thought I had hit the jackpot with my new neighbor when I moved into my first apartment, until I realized his helpfulness came with a very disturbing price. I had just graduated college and landed my first real job in a new city where I didn't know anyone. The apartment complex was nice enough, in a quiet neighborhood with mostly young professionals and small families. My unit was on the second floor, corner unit, with a balcony overlooking the parking lot. On my first day of moving, I was struggling to carry a heavy dresser up the stairs when this guy appeared out of nowhere offering to help. He introduced himself as Derek from the unit directly below mine. He seemed friendly enough, maybe mid-30s, well-dressed, and he made the whole moving process so much easier. He even helped me arrange furniture and recommended the best pizza place in the area. Over the next few weeks, Derek continued being incredibly helpful. If I was carrying groceries, he'd appear to offer assistance. When my internet went out, he knocked on my door within minutes, offering to let me use his Wi-Fi. He always seemed to know exactly when I needed help, which I initially thought was just good timing and neighborly awareness. But then I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. Derek always seemed to know my schedule better than he should. He'd mention that he heard me leave early for work or comment about me coming home late from dinner with friends. When I asked how he knew these details, he'd laugh it off, saying the walls were thin or he happened to see me from his window. The turning point came about 6 weeks after I'd moved in. I had been sick with the flu for 3 days, calling in sick to work and barely leaving my apartment. I was finally feeling better and decided to make a quick run to the pharmacy. As I was locking my door, Derek appeared in the hallway, looking surprised to see me. "Oh wow, you're finally feeling better," he said. "I was getting worried since I hadn't heard you moving around much the past few days. Your cough sounded pretty bad through the ceiling." That comment stopped me cold. My bedroom was on the opposite side of the apartment from where his unit would be below. There was no way he could hear me coughing from his living room or kitchen. The only way he could hear sounds from my bedroom would be if he was spending time directly underneath it, in what should be his bedroom. I started paying closer attention to his behavior after that. I noticed he always seemed to be in his apartment when I was home, but I never heard normal sounds of daily life from below. No TV, no music, no phone conversations. It was like he was just sitting quietly, listening. Then I realized something even more disturbing. Several times when I had friends over, Derek would find an excuse to come upstairs within an hour of their arrival. He'd knock on the door, asking to borrow something random, or claiming there was a package delivery issue he needed to discuss. Each time, he'd linger in the doorway, clearly trying to get a look at who was visiting and listening to our conversations. The final straw came on a Friday night when I was having dinner with a guy I'd started dating. We were talking quietly on my balcony when I noticed movement in the apartment directly across the parking lot. Someone was standing at their window with what looked like binoculars, watching my balcony. The apartment should have been empty since I knew the tenant had moved out the week before. I excused myself and went inside to get a better angle on the window. When I looked again, the person was gone, but I was pretty sure it had been Derek. The more I thought about it, the more I realized he somehow had access to that empty unit and was using it as a vantage point to watch my apartment when he couldn't hear what was happening from below. The next morning, I called the apartment management office and asked to speak with someone about security concerns. When I explained the situation, the property manager got very serious very quickly. She asked me to come in immediately and bring any documentation of the incidents I could remember. During our meeting, she revealed that Derek wasn't actually a tenant. The real tenant in that unit had moved out 2 months earlier, right before I moved in. Derek had somehow been accessing the empty apartment and living there illegally. They had no record of him on any lease, and he'd apparently been intercepting mail and packages to maintain the illusion that he lived there legitimately. The property manager called the police immediately, and they discovered that Derek had been using a copied key to access not just the empty unit below mine, but also the vacant apartment across the parking lot. He had set up what they described as a surveillance station with cameras, notebooks full of observations about my daily routine, and photos taken with a telephoto lens from the balcony across the way. When they arrested him, they found he had detailed logs of my activities, including times I left and returned, what I wore, who visited me, and even transcripts of conversations he'd overheard through the thin walls and floors. He had been planning what the police called an escalating campaign of stalking behavior. The most chilling part was when they searched his actual residence, which was across town. They found similar surveillance setups and documentation related to 3 other young women in different apartment complexes. I wasn't his first target, and I probably wouldn't have been his last. I moved out of that apartment the following week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. The police recommended I vary my routines, change my phone number, and be extra cautious about sharing personal information online. Derek was charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and several other crimes. But the experience left me paranoid about how much strangers can observe and learn about your life without you even realizing it. Now, I'm extremely cautious about overly helpful neighbors and always trust my instincts when something feels off about someone's behavior, no matter how nice they seem on the surface. This was shared with me on Instagram by Jessica Chen, and it shows why you should always trust those gut feelings, even when everything seems normal. I almost got into the wrong car that night, and I'm convinced that decision saved my life. I was visiting my sister in Portland for the weekend, staying at her apartment while she was out of town at a conference. Saturday night, I decided to check out the downtown nightlife scene, something I rarely did back home in my small college town. I spent the evening bar hopping with some people I'd met at the first place, having a great time and feeling more social than I had in months. Around midnight, I realized I was pretty tired and definitely ready to head back to my sister's place. The group I'd been hanging out with wanted to keep the party going, but I called a rideshare and said my goodbyes. The app estimated a 12-minute wait, which seemed reasonable for a Saturday night in a busy part of downtown. I was standing outside the last bar we'd visited, checking my phone for the driver's location, when a dark SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver rolled down the passenger window and called out, "Jessica? Uber for Jessica?" I looked at my phone again. My driver was still showing as 8 minutes away, and the car in the app was listed as a white Toyota Camry. This was definitely not the right vehicle, but the driver seemed insistent. "Come on, Jessica, let's go. I've been looking for you." Something about his tone made me uncomfortable. He sounded annoyed, almost aggressive, like I was keeping him waiting. But according to my app, my actual driver hadn't even started heading my way yet. I stepped back from the SUV and said, "I think there's been a mistake. My ride isn't supposed to be here yet." The driver got more persistent. "Look, I'm here now and I've got other pickups to make. Just get in and I'll take you where you need to go. The address is on Morrison Street, right?" That stopped me cold. I had never given Morrison Street as my destination. My sister's apartment was on Burnside, not Morrison. There was no way this could be my legitimate driver if he had the wrong address, and there was definitely no way he should know any address associated with me. I backed away from the vehicle and firmly said, "No, this isn't my ride. You have the wrong person." But instead of driving away to find his actual passenger, the driver put the car in park and started to get out. He was a large man, probably in his 40s, wearing dark clothes and moving toward me with obvious intent. "Come on, don't make this difficult," he said, reaching out like he was going to grab my arm. I started walking quickly toward the entrance of the bar, but it had closed while I wasn't paying attention. The bouncer was gone and the doors were locked. The street that had been busy with foot traffic an hour earlier was now nearly empty, with just a few people way down the block. The man followed me, staying about 10 feet back but clearly tracking my movements. I pulled out my phone and started to dial 911, which seemed to make him hesitate. He stopped following me directly, but went back to his SUV, which he moved to a parking spot across the street where he could still watch me. My actual rideshare driver called about 2 minutes later, saying he was having trouble finding me because there were several bars on that block. I stayed on the phone with him, describing exactly where I was standing and what I was wearing. When his white Camry pulled up, I verified his license plate against the app before getting anywhere near the vehicle. Even then, I was paranoid. I had the driver confirm my sister's exact address and show me his driver identification before I got in the car. The whole time, I could see the dark SUV still parked across the street, watching everything. During the ride back to my sister's place, I told my driver what had happened. He got very serious and said this wasn't the first time he'd heard about fake rideshare drivers targeting people, especially young women leaving bars alone late at night. He said these predators would cruise popular nightlife areas, listening for people on phone calls arranging rides, or just approach anyone standing alone looking at their phone. The most disturbing part was that he somehow knew a version of my name and had an address that was close to where I was actually going. The driver explained that these fake drivers often work in teams, with someone inside the bars or nearby, listening to conversations and phone calls, gathering information to make their approach seem more legitimate. When we got to my sister's apartment, my driver waited until I was safely inside the building before driving away. I called the police to report the incident, but without a license plate number or more specific description, there wasn't much they could do beyond adding it to their reports of similar incidents in that area. The next morning, I did some research and found several news stories about fake rideshare drivers in major cities targeting vulnerable passengers. Some cases involved robbery, others involved assault, and a few involved people who were never seen again after getting into the wrong vehicle. What scared me most was how close I came to just getting in that SUV. If I had been a little more drunk, a little more tired, or a little less cautious about checking the details on my app, I might have made a completely different decision. The man seemed to know exactly how to exploit the confusion and trust that people have when they're expecting a ride. I always triple-check vehicle details now, never get in a car without verifying the driver's identity, and I try never to wait for rides in isolated areas. That night taught me that predators are incredibly good at exploiting systems and situations that we trust, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and real danger is paying attention to those small details that don't quite add up.